Hello everyone. Welcome to our workshop webinar here at the Academy on rules to break to make your picture book. Children are natural rule breakers. Firstly, because they don't know the rules, and secondly, because kids are naturally curious to find out what if. We want to help you refine that rebellious spirit, first by teaching you a bunch of rules, then by showing examples of books that break them, and then by having you do some in-workshop exercises to share. I'm going to go first, followed by Miranda, who will also lead you in an exercise. We'll call on you to share your responses in the chat in the lower left. After this, Ariel will be sharing some of Chronicle Book's rule-breaking books and how they break rules. We also have a contest going on with prizes. Two of the prizes are based on a combination of imagination and randomness in response to the exercises. And the third prize will be random from the list of people who registered for this workshop, whether they are here or not. Each of us will briefly introduce ourselves before we speak, so I'll go first. My name is Dr. Mira Reisberg. I'm the director of the Children's Book Academy, and I've worn just about every hat in the industry, including award-winning illustrator, author, art director, independent editor, literary agent, and children's literature professor at universities. I've been working in the industry since 1988, and many of my former students have gone on to have wonderful careers. Besides being obsessed with children's books, I have 2 cats, a lovely husband, and a very meaningful life. I think that pretty much sums it up. So, who's ready to share some sacred and not so sacred shibboleths? And in classic rule-breaking style, I'm going to share my rules in a non-linear fashion. First person point of view, not good. Many editors have said that first-person narratives where the main character tells the story using the I word, such as I went to the store, are too complex for young children. Using present tense has also been frowned upon for the same reason. But with the rise of both the internet and television watching in children's lives over the past 10 years, children's ability to comprehend more complex understandings, such as the child in the book is separate from me, has expanded. Each of these books is told from the main character's point of view, although I'm not also switches tenses a bit. The Crossing, written by Donna Jo Napoli, illustrated by Jim Madsen. In this book, we experience the Lewis and Clark westward exploration through the perspective of Sacagawea's infant son. Swaddled and strapped to her back, Jean-Baptiste narrates the experiences and memories he has from their travels. He recounts animals and their sounds, sights and people, hunger, and a visit to the sea using I statements and present tense with great rhythmic language. 17 Things I'm Not Allowed to Do Anymore is a hilarious story all about the great ideas kids have and how grown-ups respond. A creative little girl has all sorts of ideas that exasperate and torment her family, classmates, and teachers. Each idea she shares, I had an idea to staple my brother's hair to his pillow, is met with a restriction. I'm not allowed to use the stapler anymore. Told by the little girl, each idea seems perfectly reasonable, while the list of things she isn't allowed to do anymore seem to get more ridiculous, at least if you're a kid. I'm Not is a book for kids who sometimes feel overshadowed by their friends. A little crocodile's friend, Evelyn, is all sorts of things, including not the least bit ordinary. But the main character feels less than Evelyn. As the croc shares all things she is not, a circus performer, an explorer, the Queen of England, she begins to see things a little differently. Evelyn isn't very good at spelling, can't karate chop, or bake cookies. But the other little crocodile is not terrible at those things. In the end, she discovers that not only is she good at things that Evelyn is not, but they are both tried and true friends. Rule 19. don't include multiple main characters. This is based on the same concern with complexity, and indeed, if you have too many characters, it can be confusing. However, if done well, you can absolutely have multiple main characters. Here you'll see examples in the following books. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. At breakfast one morning, Grandpa is flipping pancakes while the kids, Henry and his sister, argue over who can eat more. A stray pancake comes flying through the sky, landing on Henry. That night at bedtime, Grandpa, inspired by the pancake incident, shares the story of the town of Chew and Swallow, a town where the weather doesn't bring rain or sun, but a sunset of jello and storms of hamburgers. Unfortunately, the weather goes haywire, and suddenly the town finds itself trying to dig itself out from under enormous pancakes, floods of maple syrup, and dodging giant pickles that crash through their roofs. There are three main characters in this book: the little girl whose point of view starts the story, the grandpa who then takes it over, and the weather itself is also a character in this zany story as the weather drives the town of Chew and Swallow's population off to live where food is found in supermarkets and corner stores. In Los Gatos Black on Halloween, a whole cast of characters party at the Monsters' Ball on Halloween night. From witches on their brooms to skeletons rattling their bones to vampires, zombies, and more. The book is full of episodic characters. One appears after the other as they head to the haunted ball. But what's the one thing that scares them all? Human children, of course, who knock on the door asking for candy, horrifying the horrors. Told from an omniscient perspective, The Six Fools features four main characters. A young man proposes to a young woman. When they go share the good news with her parents, her mother sends the girl down to the cellar to draw a pitcher of cider. While pouring, the girl is distracted by the idea of what to name her firstborn once she's married. Her mother comes down to check on her, followed by her father. They all sit daydreaming while the cider overflows and fills the cellar. When he goes to check on them, the young man calls them all fools and says instead of marrying the girl, he will spend the next year looking for three people more foolish than the girl and her parents. If he can find them, he will return and marry the girl. He does, so he returns to the silly family and marries the girl. Circle Square Moose. This begins as a simple shape book until Moose arrives on the scene, pushing his way into everything, trying to get attention. Zebra soon follows, trying to rein in Moose and return the story to its original purpose. Cat is roped into the meta-narrative as Moose's antics gets crazier and Zebra tries harder and harder to keep him in line. In Rule 27, the main character needs to solve his or her own problem. This is called agency, where the main character is not just the passive recipient of someone else's problem-solving skills. However, as our examples will show, every now and then a young character can use the help of an adult. Still, having said this, if you're a newer writer, I'd encourage you to give your main character agency if possible, as kids' books are all about empowering, educating, or socializing them. Prudence wants a pet. Prudence so desperately wants a pet, but her grandparents aren't going for it. So Prudence finds her own, a branch. Except Pet Branch isn't working out quite the way she thought it would. It trips Dad and he breaks it into twigs. Prudence tries out Twig, but moves on to other objects such as Shoe and her little brother. None of them are quite right, though. Her parents finally relent and give her a pet for her birthday, a cat that she names Branch. Albert's Bad Word. One day at a garden party, Albert overhears a bad word. The word sneaks into his mouth, and when a croquet mallet lands on his foot, it escapes in spectacular fashion. His mother marches him off to the bathroom where she scrubs his mouth out, while the word sits on his shoulder chuckling. Realizing He needs to do something. Albert goes to see a wizard who bakes up a cake of better words with raisins and eggs and flour, and Albert eats it. After returning to the party, another mallet lands on Albert's foot, and everyone holds their breath to see what comes out of his mouth this time. Fortunately, the magician's magic has worked, and a stream of more polite curses emerges. So it's really the wizard that solves that one. The little rabbit who wanted red wings. Little rabbit really wants a lovely pair of red wings, so when he visits the wishing well, he makes a wish for them. Be careful what you wish for, you might just get it. To his delight, little rabbit begins sprouting wings. By the evening, they are fully emerged, but when he tries to return home, his mom doesn't recognize him and turns him away. Sadly, he tries the homes of other friends, but no one will take him in until he reaches Mr. Badger's house. Mr. Badger sees him for who he is and grasps the situation. After an uncomfortable and sorrowful night, Mr. Badger tells Little Rabbit to return to the well and wish them away. Little Rabbit follows this advice, and with his wings gone, his worried mum knows her little bunny and welcomes him home with open arms. Rule number 9. No inanimate objects for major characters. This is one of my favorite rules to discredit because there are so many delightful inanimate characters animating picture books out there. Who knew a spork, a pea, green beans, and a pet glacier could be so much fun? The trick is in the quality of language and wordplay, not to mention great illustrations, and if you can, a fabulous underlying theme. Poor spork. He's neither a fork nor a spoon, but a little bit of both, a blend of his parents. He struggles to fit in with all the cutlery, and he's never chosen to be at the table as the talented forks twirl pasta and the graceful spoons balance peas and eggs. He tries to fit in, first with a hat to cover his tines, then with a crown to emphasize them, but it doesn't work well. One day someone new arrives at the table, someone who's messy and not careful, and can't use a fork or spoon. When it lights on Spork, it gurgles and coos. Turns out, Spork is the perfect implement for the new baby. Now, most kids are not interested in cutlery, but they can identify with being a bit of each of their parents to make someone completely unique. How Martha saved her parents from green beans is a twist on the eat your vegetable tale. Martha hates green beans and knows they're bad. Too bad her parents don't agree. But when a gang of terrible green beans swagger into town looking like a gang out of an old western and make mischief, it seems as if Martha is proven right. The beans throw tomatoes at teachers. They chase old ladies, frightening them, and they kidnap Martha's parents. It's up to Martha to save them from the awful gang of veggies gone bad. And she does that by eating every last one of the disgusting legumes. This earns her a future reprieve from ever eating green beans again. So once again, green beans are not much fun, but a mischievous Western-style gang is a whole other thing. Ruby's parents are weird. Her mother makes tiaras and her father specializes in topiaries. Ruby wishes she could just be normal, so she dresses in brown pinafores, serves bran muffins at her teen parties, and has 3 identical dolls, all named Jennifer. On a family vacation to visit a tiny herb topiary garden in Norway, Ruby finds a tiny glacier named Cecil, who is quite taken with her. He follows her around, much to Ruby's chagrin. A glacier is not a normal pet. But when one of her Jennifers goes missing, Cecil helps out and finds her. In gratitude, Ruby finally accepts him and gets her mom to make her a tiara. Maybe being a little weird is okay. So clearly it's the sheer quirkiness and unexpectedness of this that makes it so appealing. Little P is another book that turns the picky eater narrative on its head. Little P is a happy little P. He likes to play with his friends, listen to his mother's stories, and play with his dad at the end of the day. He does not like to eat dinner because P's eat candy for dinner. Yuck. Every day it's a different candy, and little P can't stand any of them. But if he eats 5 candies, he can have dessert. After choking down his 5 candies, little P is glad to discover spinach is on the dessert menu, and he licks his bowl clean. So it's pretty easy to see why this allegory would be a hit with both parents and kids. Rule number 10, don't address the reader directly. This is called breaking the fourth wall, where the character speaks directly to the audience. A lot of non-digital interactive books, such as Herb Toulet's Press Here, which instructs children to do exactly that, gleefully breaks this rule. I'm not sure of the reasoning behind it, but as you can see in the coming examples, addressing the reader directly and indirectly can be very immediate and very charming. In literature, there's also a thing called metafiction, where the author acknowledges to the reader that this is a book with an author and an illustrator. Chloe and the Lion is definitely metafiction. Chloe visits the merry-go-round every week using loose change she finds to pay for her ride. One day she gets lost in the forest on her way home and a dragon leaps out at her. Wait, it's supposed to be a lion, interjects the author. The book quickly devolves into the author and illustrator arguing over creative differences. Mac Barnett fires Adam Rex, hires another illustrator who he also doesn't agree with, and finally attempts to draw his own pictures. Chloe's story is almost completely lost in all their arguing until the lion begins to eat everyone, and it's up to Chloe to save everyone and end the story. While the author and illustrator don't address the reader directly, they do indirectly by making it clear that the premise of the story, Chloe's story, is fiction, and they are the things that are real. Abe and Austin are best buds, and one day they'd head over to the creek to play. When they spot some partridges crossing the river, Abe has the idea to use a fallen log to cross the creek and follow the birds. Austin crosses fine, but Abe falls into the rushing water. Austin grabs a stick and pulls Abe out, then slaps him on the back to get the water out of his lungs. Throughout the story, the narrator keeps interjecting asides to the reader, encouraging them to clap for Austin or stop grumbling, and to the illustrator, stop drawing so much noisy water, and to herself, saying they walked instead of crawled across the fallen log, making this both a metafiction and breaking the fourth wall story. And you can see that crawled is a much better verb than walked. The book with no pictures. This is a book all about breaking the fourth wall. The entire text here is addressed to an audience and the reader. Here's what makes it so delicious and so successful. Here's how books work. Everything the words say, the person reading the book has to say, no matter what. That's the deal. That's the rule. Much to the delight of the audience, the book devolves into having the presumably adult reader say funny words, blork, admit that they're a monkey, and make lots of silly noises. These actions are rounded out with scripted responses for the reader, refuting the monkey claim and being shocked by the noises. See, a book without pictures isn't boring at all. Talking animals and humans shouldn't mix. I'm not sure why this rule exists, but perhaps it comes from a desire to have a familiar, believable world where humans only talk to each other and animals only talk to each other. But clearly, it's a rule that has been happily broken in many successful and satisfying books. Farmer Brown's cows have found an old typewriter in the barn, and now they are using it to leave him notes. The barn is cold at night, and they would like an electric blankets. Then the chickens, with the help of the typing cows, request electric blankets. Farmer Brown thinks this is a ridiculous idea and refuses, so the cows and chickens go on strike. No eggs and no milk for Farmer Brown. After Farmer Brown types a note demanding milk and eggs and has Duck deliver it, the cows relent and offer to hand over the typewriter in exchange for the blankies. Farmer Brown agrees and Ducky is scheduled to drop off the blankets and return with the typewriter. Except instead of the typewriter, Farmer Brown gets a note from Duck asking for a diving board at the pond for all the ducks. Giggle, giggle, quack. Farmer Brown and Duck are back in the sequel to Click, Clack, Move. Farmer Brown is going on vacation and he's left instructions with his brother Bob, including strict instructions to keep a close eye on Duck. Too bad he doesn't notice the pencil he dropped on the ground. Bob starts following the directions on the notes he thinks Farmer Brown has left, including instructions to order pizza and wash the pigs with fancy bubble bath and nice towels. Farmer Brown finally cottons on when the animals answer the phone just before movie night, and all he hears is giggling, quacking, mooing, and oinking. He cuts his vacation short to return home and restore order. Mr. Rabbit and the Lovely Present. A little girl wants to make a birthday present for her mother, something lovely. Mr. Rabbit, a large talking rabbit, appears from the forest and helps the girl choose items for the gift. The bunny prompts her by asking what her mother likes. Each time he asks, the girl suggests a color. Mr. Rabbit understands that you can't give a color, but he helps her find things in each color that she might be able to give. By the end of the day, the little girl has gathered a nice basket of fruit in her mother's favorite colors. Mr. Rabbit hops off as she thanks him for the help. And of course, we all know the Cat in the Hat. Two kids are stuck inside on a rainy day. Their mom is out. A talking cat in a hat shows up and attempts to give them something to do. He brings out thing one and thing two to help out, and chaos ensues as the two get things all messed up, running around, balancing things like the goldfish bowl on their hands and feet, flying kites inside, and generally making a big mess. Fortunately, things are put right just before Mum returns home. While the children narrate, the cat keeps up a running commentary. The main character has to be sympathetic. I mentioned earlier that children's books are about empowering, educating, and socializing kids, as well as delighting them. The main character needs to be sympathetic rule is primarily about socializing kids. Most parents don't want bratty, mean, or unsympathetic role models for their kids. However, there are exceptions that have been successful because of their imaginative approaches to storytelling and or because of their exquisite language play. Listen to this. All around him were hideous creatures. He was so appalled he could barely manage to spit a bit of flame. All those horrid others spat back. He started to run. They all ran. He lashed out at the nearest one. But what he struck was glass. Shrek ran in the hall of mirrors. They're all me, he yodeled. All me. He faced himself full of rabid self-esteem, happier than ever to be exactly what he was. From the original Shrek by William Steig. This has fabulous rhythm, rhyme, alliteration, assonance, consonance, and is sheer joy to read out loud. And I especially love full of rabid self-esteem. What great language. Shrek is an ugly ogre. He's also stinky and rude. His parents unceremoniously kick him out of their swamp to wreak havoc on the world. While strolling through the forest, Shrek meets a witch who tells his fortune, which includes a princess. Delighted, Shrek sets off to find her, frightening people, stealing food, and eating lightning. Eventually, he finds a talking donkey, a jabbering jackass to be exact, the first sign in his fortune, and they head off to find a knight guarding a castle. Upon defeating the knight and entering the castle, Shrek finds a princess who is just as revolting as he is. The two decide to wed after exchanging some silly poetry about how ugly they each are. In This Is Not My Hat, a little fish has stolen a hat. He knows it's not his and he knows it's not right to steal, but he's going to keep it. The hat looks better on him anyways. It fits him. He's going to go where the plants grow close together and tall so the fish the hat belonged to won't be able to find him. He knows the big fish won't wake up, and even if he does, he won't know which way the little fish went. Except he does wake up, and he figures it out. He gets his hat back and goes back to napping. Kids will delight in the naughtiness of the fish, in how defiant he sounds, and how he shows no remorse. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The Grinch, a crusty, nasty creature who lives in a cave above Whoville, is, well, a Grinch. His heart is 2 sizes too small, which makes him hate everything, especially joy and happiness. When Christmas time comes, he is especially crotchety and decides to spoil all the joy and fun by sneaking into town on Christmas night and stealing all the decorations, food, and presents from every house in town. Except when Christmas morning comes, his sleigh, so weighed down by everything he's stolen, can't quite top the hill, and he comes sliding back into the center of town. Despite his best efforts to ruin everything, the Whos have all gathered together and are singing and enjoying themselves. The Grinch's heart grows several sizes, and he returns what he has taken. In this interesting story of a little boy overcoming his fear of the dark is an actual character, albeit an amorphous one. It lives in Laszlo's house, lurking in the closet, behind the shower curtain, and in the basement where it goes every morning. It frightens Laszlo. One night, the dark lures him downstairs with the invitation to see something. Slowly and hesitantly, Laszlo makes his way down into the basement, the dark speaking to him and cajoling him on further. It turns out the dark wants to give him a light bulb from a cabinet in the basement, and by the time Laszlo returns to his bed, and the dark is no longer in his room as the dawn is breaking, from that day on, the dark doesn't bother Laszlo again. Lucille, the bear, wakes up one morning and decides she is going to make a new friend. She doesn't actually have a plan, but she is going to find one. Lucy is overly exuberant and a little desperate, and that gets in her way. So she splashes all the water out of the pond, insults the skunk by trying to get the stink out of it with a bath, and steals the honey from a beehive. When no one wants to play, she even resorts to threats. Lucy is so desperate and enthusiastic, she pretty much alienates all the animals, until finally a flamingo asks to be her friend. Lucille is overjoyed. So we've all heard this one, picture books are a 50-50 split of words and pictures. This used to be true in the old days, but these days with much lower word counts, picture books have to do more of the heavy lifting. In addition, we've seen a rise in wordless picture books, beginning with David Wisner's books and continuing into the now with books like these. Most of these can also fit in the wordless books don't do well category. The Farmer and the Clown. While out in his field one day, a farmer notices something that falls off a passing train. Further inspection reveals it to be a tiny toddler clown. The farmer takes it home and over the course of the day tries to care for it. After dinner, a wash of the face reveals the child under the makeup, a child who is a lot less happy than the painted-on smile leads you to believe. The farmer tries to cheer him up at bedtime by making silly faces. The next day, while out on a picnic, the pair sees the circus train returning and they run to catch it. The other clowns are glad to see their child safe and cared for. Just before hopping back on the train, the little clown runs to give the farmer a heartfelt hug. And there's also a sweet little twist at the end that I'm not going to give away. The Farmer and the Clown is a story about how small interactions can have big impacts. While flying through the city, a little bluebird notices a lonely boy being picked on by some children at school. After school, the bluebird befriends the boy, and the two spend a happy afternoon playing hide and seek, sharing a cookie, and sailing a toy boat. As they enter a park, the bullies from school show up and try to take the boy's boat. When the bullies throw a stick, the bluebird blocks it and is killed. While the bullies run off, stunned by what they've done, the boy and the bird are lifted up by a flock of birds who usher the bluebird off into the distance as the boy waves goodbye. Shades of grey, black and white are used symbolically throughout the story to convey emotion and mood. Expressions on the children's faces convey their emotions and reactions. The slightly ambiguous ending allows the reader to make a personal connection with the book by interpreting it for themselves. Bored one day, a little girl discovers a red crayon on her bedroom floor. She uses it to draw a door into another, more vibrant world. After a jaunt in the forest, she draws a boat, which takes her to a city where she sees some soldiers capture a purple bird. The girl sets off to free the bird from the cage the men have put it in. Angry over the loss of the bird, the soldiers stick the girl in the cage, but the bird returns with her crayon, and she draws her escape. Together, she and the bird travel to a palm tree in the desert where there is a purple door. Upon opening it, the girl finds herself back in her city, face to face with a boy her own age. The two draw circles, hers red, his purple, which become wheels on a bicycle built for two. So the story is all about imagination with a plot. It's wonderful. The arrival. A man packs his things in the arrival while his wife and child look on. Trailed by shadows and shadowy creatures, the three trudge down to the docks where the man boards the ship and sails off. When he arrives in a new land, it's very different and confusing. It's full of strange new plants, creatures, foods, and floating elevators. A foreign language is scrawled in various places. Despite its strangeness, the new land is not devoid of kindness and kind people, and the man finds friendship and help. From the language to the odd creatures to the new technology, the arrival uses visuals to symbolize the strangeness and foreignness of the immigrant experience. Daisy, a small lapdog, has a favorite toy, a big red ball. She chases it, sleeps with it, and shares it with her human, a small girl. One day they take it out on a walk through their neighborhood. While tossing and fetching the ball, it goes over the fence into a park where Daisy and her human encounter another dog who snatches the ball. Daisy tries to grab for it, but it pops. Dejectedly, she walks home and sleeps on the sofa without her ball. The next day, her little girl takes her back to the park where the other dog and his girl are waiting with a new ball. The two dogs run off to play with it, and when it's time to go home, Daisy proudly and happily carries it back. The last page shows Daisy snuggled up with her new ball on the couch. The illustrations perfectly capture Daisy's facial expressions and body language, while swaths of colour also help set the mood and convey emotion. So, all of these wordless books tell deep and soulful stories and use mood and emotion through form and colour to tell them. And next, to break the prime tenet that picture books have to have pictures, there's the recent, the book with no pictures. So you can see what fun it is when you're reading it out loud. Quiet books don't do well. This rule rests on the assumption that kids need plot and action all the time. But in creating a bedtime story, the opposite is true. With a gentle winding down of energy, or most of the time it's true. Non-fiction and concept books are the genres where quiet books shine. Sparse lyrical text is often one of the hallmarks of a quiet book. The Quiet Book is a book about all the different kinds of quiet there are, from waking up to falling asleep. Quiet can be heard before a concert begins, while playing hide and seek, hiding your flashlight under the covers, or being with a friend who understands. A cast of darling characters show readers all these different ways of being quiet. It's time for bed in the great green room. After taking inventory of many of the treasures in the room, the little bunny tucked into bed says goodnight to each object, including the pictures, the kittens, the mittens, and of course the moon. A Seed is Sleepy is a gentle non-fiction book about seeds and the plants they become. The author uses a variety of unusual adjectives, sleepy, naked, adventurous, to describe seeds, what they do, what they are, and how they grow. Jumping off from these descriptions, she delves into seed biology. This book is an inventive approach to teaching early science concepts. And here's my last one. A picture book needs a happy ending. In many of the Grimm fairy tales, and even Hans Christian Andersen's original Little Mermaid story, the main characters did not have happy endings. But with the Disneyfication of culture, there's been an imperative to always be positive and have a happy ending. Personally, I think it's important for kids to have hope, but in more recent times, we've seen books such as the following end with less than happy endings, or with a sense of sadness. Bear is looking for his hat. He asks several woodland animals if they've seen it. Some don't know what a hat is. Others have never seen a hat or saw a different one. The only odd response is Rabbit, who is wearing a red pointy hat. He claims not to have seen a hat or any hats, and he would certainly never steal a hat. Bear moves on to other animals, but becomes discouraged. Deer happens upon Bear and asks what his hat looks like. In describing it, Bear realizes he has seen it on the head of a certain rabbit. He finds Rabbit, and the turn of the page reveals him happily wearing his hat with no rabbit in sight. The punchline comes when a squirrel asks Bear if he's seen Rabbit. Bear responds guiltily, and almost exactly the way Rabbit did, that he has not seen Rabbit or any rabbits, and he certainly wouldn't eat a rabbit. The humor and irony of this story makes up for the sad fact of Rabbit's obvious demise. So here's another one with rabbits. At first, just a few rabbits arrive. A few are even friendly with the native population of animals, but then more and more come. They bring animals and weapons and slowly take over the land. Nothing can stop them, and they destroy the native animals, making them sick, warring with them, and stealing their food and children. The land dries up and becomes barren, and those that are left wondering what will happen. This environmental parable against colonization and overpopulation is definitely for upper elementary, with its bleak ending and somber art. If the art wasn't so extraordinary, I don't know if it would have been published. Additionally, it was originally published overseas in Australia, where they tend to have more of an openness to more mature themes for children. Erica's Story is another originally published overseas book. It tells the story of a woman the author met while traveling through Germany. She shared her story with Van der Zee. As a tiny baby, the woman's family was forced into a Jewish ghetto and ultimately herded into rail cars, presumably to be taken to a concentration camp. Her mother, however, tossed her from the rail car as it slowed through a town. People near the tracks saw the baby, and she was taken to a woman who cared for her. Erica is not the name her mother gave her, but the name given to her by her adoptive mother. She doesn't know when her actual birthday is, or who her parents were, or if she had siblings. She knows, though, that she survived, and her star, unlike the stars of millions of others during the Holocaust, still shines. While there is hope for the main character in that her star still shines, it is still an incredibly sad story, and clearly for more mature children. So now I have a short exercise that I'd like to do with you based on breaking the don't be negative rule. where you frame your story in a negative. I'll be giving you a couple of minutes for this, but don't type them in the chat, as I'll be calling on folks whose names start with certain letters so that we can slow down the number that get posted at once in the chat and be actually able to read them out loud. Here are some books with "don't" in the title, and you can see how engaging it is. Now for your exercise, I'm going to return to the desktop. I'd like you to take an existing fairy tale or folk tale, or preferably your own story, however you want to do it, and reframe it so that the title features the word "don't." So here's my example. Don't eat that apple. Now this would be a retelling of the Sleeping Beauty story. And if you actually wanted to do this, you could have "don't" throughout the story, such as the little bird told Sleeping Beauty, "Don't trust the queen." But did Sleeping Beauty listen? No. And so you could have the sort of repeating don'ts and the repeating no. You can also use the word "no" in your title if you prefer. Remember, it's just the title to inspire you in your own work. The point is to frame it as a negative, to shake it up and break that rule.